All right, so today we're going to be diving into something pretty cool. It's the science of happiness.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, and we're using a podcast episode called The Science of Happiness Part 1 as our guide for this deep dive.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, you know how some people just seem to radiate positivity?
Yeah,
Like they
well,
hit a roadblock and they just bounce right back?
right.
What's their secret? Is it all in their genes or is there something more to it?
Well, it's a bit of both,
Yeah.
actually. The source we're looking at dives into how much control we actually have over our own happiness, and it's more complex than you might think.
Okay, so before we get into the how, let's start with the what. What exactly is happiness?
Right.
Is it just a fleeting feeling or is it something more?
It's definitely more than just a fleeting feeling.
Okay.
The source breaks it down into two main aspects: hedonia and eudaimonia.
Okay.
Hedonia is that instant gratification, that pure joy.
Yeah?
Think biting into a perfectly ripe strawberry on a summer day.
Okay, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
But what about this eudaimonia? It sounds a bit more philosophical.
It is, in a way, eudaimonia is less about the immediate pleasure and more about living a life that feels truly meaningful and purposeful.
Okay.
Imagine the feeling of accomplishment after completing a challenging project that you're really passionate about, that deep satisfaction. That's eudaimonia.
So it's like the difference between enjoying a delicious meal and feeling fulfilled by your career.
Yeah.
Both contribute to happiness, but in different ways.
Exactly. And the research suggests that solely chasing those hedonistic, strawberry moments, while enjoyable, may not lead to lasting happiness. It's about finding a balance between both.
Interesting. So we can't just chase pleasure all the time.
Right.
I guess it makes sense, but our brains sure do love those dopamine hits.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of brains, what's actually happening in our heads when we experience happiness?
Well, the source points out that happiness triggers activity in specific areas of our brains,
Okay.
including the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex.
Yes, this area is involved in decision-making, planning things we typically associate with, more serious thought processes.
So our thinking brain is also our happy brain. That's surprising.
It is interesting.
What's the connection there?
What's fascinating is that when we experience happiness, these brain regions trigger the release of what are often called feel-good chemicals,
Okay.
like dopamine and serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our brain's way of rewarding us for engaging in activities or having experiences that contribute to our well-being.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
But how much control do we actually have over these happy chemicals? Are we just at the mercy of our genetics?
Here's where it gets really interesting. The podcast episode claims that about 50% of our happiness is determined by our genes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like we're each born with a certain happiness set point.
So is the other half completely up to us then? Or is it more complicated than that?
It's actually a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
While genes lay the groundwork, a whopping 40% of our happiness is influenced by our own actions and choices. And the remaining 10% is attributed to external circumstances.
That's a lot of power we have.
It is.
So even if someone is predisposed to be a bit more melancholic, they can still actively work towards increasing their happiness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are specific things we can do to tap into that 40%.
Okay.
One powerful practice the source highlights is gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but regularly practicing gratitude,
Yeah.
like keeping a gratitude journal, can actually change our brain chemistry.
Right. So simply writing down a few things we're grateful for each day can make a tangible difference in our happiness levels.
It can.
How does that work?
By consistently focusing on the positive aspects of our lives, we're essentially training our brains to be more attuned to the good.
Okay.
This repeated activation strengthens those neural pathways, leading to increased feelings of happiness over time.
So we're not just tricking ourselves into feeling better, we're actually rewiring our brains for happiness.
Exactly.
That's incredible. I'm starting to see why this science of happiness thing is so fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's just scratching the surface.
Right.
The source also debunks some common myths about what does and doesn't lead to lasting happiness.
Oh, yeah.
For example, many believe that more money equals more happiness.
Right. The classic.
Oh yeah, the classic money buys happiness myth.
Yeah.
But we all know people who have tons of money and are still miserable.
Right.
What does the research say about that?
Well, it turns out that money does contribute to happiness,
Okay.
but only up to a point,
Okay.
once our basic needs are met.
Right.
And we have a sense of financial security, the correlation between money and happiness plateaus.
So it's about having enough to live comfortably and feel secure, but after that, the returns diminish.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that experiences and relationships are often more reliable sources of lasting joy than material possessions.
Okay, so experiences over things.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. What's another common myth about happiness that the source challenges?
The idea that happiness is a constant state.
Okay.
We often see this unrealistic portrayal in media, where people are always smiling and cheerful.
Yeah.
But in reality, happiness isn't a straight line. It's more like a wave with peaks and troughs.
Right. Expecting to be happy all the time is setting yourself up for disappointment.
Exactly.
Life throws curveballs. It's normal to experience a range of emotions.
Exactly. It's about accepting those ups and downs as part of the journey and learning to navigate them effectively. What's important is the overall trend. Are you generally moving towards greater happiness and well-being?
That's a good way to look at it. It's not about denying the negative emotions. It's about learning how to cope with them and build resilience. What's the final happiness myth we're busting today?
The belief that achieving goals automatically leads to lasting happiness. We're often told that if we just work hard enough and reach certain milestones, we'll finally achieve lasting happiness.
Okay.
But the research suggests that's not the whole story.
So it's not as simple as chase your dreams and you'll be happy. There's got to be more to it than that.
You're right. The podcast episode introduces the concept of hedonic adaptation,
Hedonic adaptation.
which basically means we get used to good things.
Okay.
Remember that feeling of getting a new car?
Oh, yeah.
At first, it's exhilarating,
Uh-huh.
but over time, the excitement fades as it becomes our new normal.
Ah, so we adapt to the good stuff and the initial happiness boost fades away.
Right.
So how do I prevent ourselves from constantly chasing the next new car feeling?
It's not about avoiding goals or achievements. It's about shifting our focus.
Okay.
The source suggests that it's more about finding fulfillment in the journey itself,
Okay.
rather than solely focusing on the destination. It's about appreciating the small wins along the way, the growth we experience, and the connections we make.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
It's about finding joy in the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our exploration into the science of happiness. We've unpacked a lot,
We have.
but there's still much more to discover.
I'm already hooked. We've learned about different types of happiness, how our brains react, and even debunked some common myths. What can our listeners look forward to in the next part of our deep dive?
In part 2, we'll explore actionable strategies and habits that can help boost your well-being.
Ooh.
Think of it as a toolkit for building a happier and more fulfilling life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into happiness.
Yes.
Last time, we uncovered some fascinating insights about what happiness is, how it works in our brains, and even busted a few common myths.
Absolutely.
We also touched on that crucial 40%,
Yeah,
the portion of our happiness we can actually influence through our choices and actions.
that's right.
So let's get practical.
Yeah.
What are some concrete steps we can take to actually boost our well-being?
Okay.
The podcast episode we're using mentions mindfulness, which seems to be everywhere these days. What's the connection between mindfulness and happiness?
Well, mindfulness is all about being present and aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment. It's like hitting the pause button on that constant mental chatter and just observing what's happening within us and around us.
So instead of getting swept away by worries about the future or dwelling on the past, mindfulness is about grounding ourselves in the present moment.
Precisely. And the research on mindfulness is quite compelling.
Okay.
Studies have shown that practices like meditation can reduce stress, improve focus, and even increase feelings of compassion and connection.
I've tried meditation before, but I always struggle to quiet my mind.
Right.
Is there a trick to it?
It's definitely a practice, and it takes time and patience.
Okay.
The key is not to judge yourself for having thoughts. They're bound to pop up.
Right.
Instead, simply acknowledge them and gently guide your attention back to your breath or whatever anchor you're using.
So it's a skill you develop over time, like learning to play an instrument.
Yes.
The more you practice, the better you get at it.
Exactly. And the benefits extend beyond stress reduction.
Okay.
Some studies suggest that regular meditation can actually change the structure and function of our brains,
Right.
strengthening areas associated with emotional regulation and self-awareness.
So we're not just calming our minds, we're actually rewiring our brains for happiness. Sign me up. Besides meditation, are there other ways to cultivate mindfulness in our daily lives?
Absolutely. Mindful walking, mindful eating, you can bring that awareness to any activity.
Oh, okay.
It's about slowing down, paying attention to your senses, and fully experiencing each moment.
I love that. It's about finding those little pockets of mindfulness throughout the day, not just during formal meditation.
Exactly. And the podcast episode also emphasizes the importance of strong social connections.
Okay.
We are, after all, social creatures.
Makes sense. We all need those people we can laugh with, confide in, and just share life with.
Yes.
But is there a scientific basis for saying that social connection contributes to happiness?
There is. Research shows that people with strong social ties tend to be happier, healthier, and even live longer.
Really?
Close relationships provide a sense of belonging, support, and purpose, all of which contribute to our overall well-being.
It's about having that tribe, that network of people who have your back.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine it works both ways. Nurturing those relationships and seeking out new connections can boost happiness.
You're absolutely right. It's a two-way street. And it's not just about quantity, but quality.
Yeah.
It's those deep, meaningful connections where you feel truly seen and understood that have the greatest impact.
It's about investing time and energy in building those genuine connections.
Yes.
And speaking of investing in something meaningful, the podcast also mentions the positive effects of helping others.
Yes.
It's almost like a universal truth. Doing good makes you feel good.
And there's scientific evidence to back that up.
Oh, really?
Acts of kindness and generosity trigger the release of endorphins, those natural mood boosters in our brains.
So it's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. There's actual brain chemistry at play.
Yeah.
But does it have to be something grand? Like, do I need to start a charity to reap those benefits?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Small acts of kindness can be just as powerful. Holding a door open for someone offering a genuine compliment, volunteering at a local organization, it all adds up.
It's about making a conscious effort to incorporate kindness into our daily interactions. And the ripple effect can be incredible.
It can.
One small act can brighten someone's day and inspire them to pay it forward.
That's right.
Now, alongside nurturing our social and emotional well-being, the podcast also highlights the importance of taking care of our physical health.
Right. It's all connected.
That makes sense. Our physical and mental states are so interconnected. I know I feel much happier and more energetic when I'm taking care of my body, but how exactly does this link between physical health and happiness play out?
Well, think about it this way. Our brains need the right fuel and conditions to function optimally.
Right?
That means getting enough sleep, eating nutritious food, and engaging in regular physical activity.
I can see how neglecting those basic needs would definitely impact mood and energy levels.
Yeah.
But is there a specific aspect of physical health that has the biggest impact on happiness?
Research points to exercise as a powerful mood booster.
Okay.
It releases those feel-good endorphins we talked about and can even help reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression.
So getting our bodies moving is like a natural antidepressant.
In a way, yes.
Oh.
And it doesn't have to be intense workouts.
Okay.
Even moderate exercise like brisk walking, dancing, or gardening can make a big difference.
It's about finding activities you enjoy and making movement a regular part of your routine. I'm starting to notice a theme here. All these happiness-boosting strategies are things within our control.
Yeah.
It's empowering.
It is. It's about shifting from a passive mindset of waiting for happiness to find us to actively creating the conditions for it to flourish.
And it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about those small, consistent actions that add up over time.
Yes.
But I imagine there are still obstacles, right? Like, what about that voice in our heads that tells us we're not good enough, that we need to be more successful, more attractive, or whatever?
You're talking about the comparison trap.
Yes.
And it's a major happiness killer. Yep. The podcast source addresses this directly, especially in the context of social media.
Oh, absolutely. Scrolling through those perfectly curated feeds can make anyone feel inadequate.
Right.
It's like we're constantly comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. And the source reminds us that those online portrayals are often far from reality.
Right.
We're only seeing a carefully constructed snapshot, not the full picture.
It's so easy to forget that. So how do we break free from the comparison trap and reclaim our happiness?
The podcast suggests being mindful of the content we consume.
Okay.
If certain accounts consistently make you feel bad about yourself, maybe it's time to unfollow or mute them.
It's about curating your online experience to protect your mental well-being. And I guess it's also about remembering that everyone is on their own unique journey.
Precisely. Comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20 is a recipe for unhappiness.
Right.
It's about celebrating your own progress, no matter how big or small, and focusing on your own definition of success.
That's a great reminder. It's about running your own race, not comparing yourself to others.
And it's about recognizing that happiness isn't a competition.
Right.
It's an individual journey that unfolds at its own pace.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into the science of happiness. So far, we've explored the different types of happiness, delved into the brain science behind it, busted common myths, and even learned some practical strategies for boosting our well-being. But there's one thing I'm still curious about. Are there certain mental states or activities that are especially conducive to happiness?
That's a great question, and it's something the podcast episode we're exploring touches on.
Hmm.
It introduces the idea of flow states.
Yeah.
Have you ever been so engrossed in an activity that you completely lose track of time?
Oh, absolutely. For me, it's when I'm writing, hours can fly by and it feels effortless. Is that what you mean by a flow state?
Exactly. It's that feeling of being completely absorbed in what you're doing, where your skills and the challenge of the task are perfectly matched. You're focused, energized, and fully present in the moment.
It's like being in the zone where everything just clicks. But how do flow states actually contribute to happiness?
Well, research suggests that people who frequently experience flow states tend to report higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction. It makes sense, right? When you're fully engaged in something you enjoy and are good at, it's naturally rewarding.
It's like tapping into that sweet spot where challenge meets mastery, and the source suggests that we can actively cultivate flow states.
That's right. The key is choosing activities that align with your interests and skills. Think about what truly captivates your attention, those activities where you lose yourself in the process. It could be anything from painting to playing a sport to solving complex problems.
So it's about finding that thing that sparks your passion and then honing your skills in that area. I can see how mastering a skill, even if it's just a hobby, could contribute to a sense of accomplishment and ultimately happiness.
Precisely. And speaking of accomplishment, the podcast also highlights the importance of having a sense of purpose. It's about feeling like your life has meaning, direction, and significance beyond just day-to-day activities.
I think we all crave that feeling of purpose, of knowing that our lives matter. But how do we find it? Is it something we discover or something we create?
It can be a bit of both. The source suggests exploring your passions, connecting with your values, and identifying ways to contribute to something larger than yourself.
So it's about asking those big questions like, what am I passionate about? What do I value most? How can I make a positive impact on the world?
Exactly. It's an ongoing process of reflection and experimentation. And the beauty is that purpose can be found in so many different areas of life. Your career, your relationships, your hobbies, your community involvement.
It's about aligning your actions with what you believe in, living authentically, and making a contribution that feels meaningful to you.
Well said. And research shows that having a strong sense of purpose can lead to increased resilience, well-being, and overall life satisfaction.
That makes sense. When you have that clear why, it can help you navigate challenges and setbacks with more strength and determination. You know what you're working towards, what you're fighting for.
Absolutely. Speaking of navigating challenges, there's one final piece of the happiness puzzle that the podcast episode touches on: self-compassion.
Self-compassion, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand what it means.
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding that you would offer to a good friend. It's about recognizing that you're human, that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
So it's about being gentle with ourselves, especially when we mess up or face setbacks. I think that's something a lot of us struggle with. We tend to be our own harshest critics.
It's true, and the source emphasizes that self-compassion is not about letting yourself off the hook or making excuses. It's about acknowledging your imperfections without beating yourself up about them.
It's about accepting our flaws and mistakes as part of the human experience, not as defining characteristics.
Exactly. And research has shown that self-compassion can lead to increased happiness, resilience, and a greater sense of overall well-being.
It's like giving yourself permission to be imperfect, to learn and grow from your mistakes without all that harsh self-judgment.
Precisely. And remember, practicing self-compassion is a skill just like mindfulness or gratitude. It takes time and effort to cultivate, but the rewards are well worth it.
This has been an incredibly enlightening deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from understanding the different facets of happiness to exploring practical strategies and even delving into these more advanced concepts like flow states, purpose, and self-compassion.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners feel equipped with new knowledge and tools to create more happiness in their own lives.
Me too. It's been a great reminder that happiness is not some elusive destination, but a journey that we can actively shape through our choices and actions.
And remember, it's an ongoing process. There will be ups and downs, moments of joy and moments of challenge. But by cultivating these practices and incorporating them into our daily lives, we can build a solid foundation for lasting well-being.
So to our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the science of happiness.
And most importantly, remember that happiness is not a luxury. It's an essential ingredient for a fulfilling and meaningful life. So go out there and create your own happiness.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
All right, so today we're going to be taking another deep dive into the Science of Happiness podcast,
Okay.
specifically part 2 of their series. And in this one, they're talking about all this
Yeah.
sort of science-backed tips to increase your happiness levels. And I think it's one that we can all benefit from, right? I mean, who doesn't want to be happier?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what everybody's searching for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The secret to happiness.
Yeah, the secret sauce. So let's dive in and see what they have to say.
Okay, that's good.
So first up, they talk about the importance of relationships.
Okay.
Now, this is not a new concept to anyone, right?
Yeah.
We all know the relationships are important, but they break down why and how they actually impact our well-being.
Yeah, they go into the neuroscience behind it a little bit too, which is really interesting. Like,
Yes.
what's actually happening in our brains when we connect with other people?
Exactly. And they emphasize that it's not about like the number of followers you have on social media or anything like that.
No, it's not about quantity at all.
Yeah.
It's about quality. It's about having those deep, meaningful connections.
Yeah, a few really good friends
They just
you can really rely on and who get you.
Yeah, those are the ones who really make a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they also talk about the power of acts of kindness,
Yes.
which I thought was really interesting because even just small acts of kindness can boost happiness for both the giver and the receiver.
Yeah, like imagine if you just take a minute to help someone out or give someone a compliment. Like,
Right.
it just brightens their day, but it also brightens yours too.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
And it's because it triggers the release of serotonin,
Right.
which is a mood-boosting chemical in our brains.
Exactly. So you're not just being nice, you're actually like
Yeah.
giving yourself a little happiness boost.
Yeah, it's like a happiness boomerang.
I love that.
A
Yeah,
happiness
yeah.
boomerang.
What you put out comes back to you.
And another thing they touch on in terms of relationships is active listening,
Oh, yes.
which I think is
Such an important skill.
so important, but so hard to do,
It is.
especially in today's world with all the distractions.
Right. We're constantly bombarded with information and notifications, and
Yeah.
it's so easy to just kind of half listen.
Yeah, we're so used to just like waiting for our turn to talk
Exactly.
that we don't actually take the time to really hear what the other person is saying.
And when you really think about it, like, how does it make you feel when you know someone's not really listening to you?
So terrible.
Right. It makes you feel unimportant.
Yeah.
So when we put the phones down, we make eye contact, and we really focus on what the other person is saying, it makes them feel valued, and it deepens that connection.
Yeah. Note to self, put the phone down and actually listen.
Seriously.
Okay, so moving on from relationships,
Okay.
they also talk about the importance of mindset.
Yes. Mindset is huge.
And specifically, they dive into this whole growth mindset thing, which is the belief that we can always learn, grow, and get better at things.
It's that idea that, like, our abilities aren't fixed.
Yeah.
That we can always improve with effort and learning.
And I think this ties in really nicely with resilience, right?
Absolutely. Because if you have a growth mindset,
Yeah.
you're more likely to see challenges as opportunities to learn.
Right.
So when things get tough,
Yeah.
you're not going to give up as easily.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. And they actually take it a step further and suggest that we should embrace challenges.
Yes.
Like, actually look forward to them.
Yeah, because there are opportunities for growth.
Exactly.
Like, I love that shift in perspective.
You do too.
Because instead of fearing challenges,
Yeah.
you're seeing them as stepping stones to becoming a better version of yourself.
And it's not about being, like, unrealistically positive all the time.
Right.
It's just about acknowledging that challenges are part of life.
Yeah.
And that we can learn and grow from them.
Exactly. And alongside that idea of embracing challenges, they also emphasize the importance of self-compassion.
Oh, yes. Self-compassion is so crucial.
Especially when things are tough.
Especially when things are tough.
It's easy to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes.
It is. We're often our own worst critics.
But think about it. Would you constantly criticize a friend for messing up?
Probably not.
No. So why do we do it to ourselves?
Right. We need to give ourselves the same grace that we give others.
Exactly. And they also talk about celebrating even the smallest wins,
Yes.
which I think is such a good tip.
It's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But it can make a big difference.
It's like acknowledging your progress, even in small steps, can really help you stay motivated.
Exactly. It reinforces those positive behaviors, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment.
So we've talked about relationships and mindset.
Yes.
Are you ready for some actual actionable tips
Okay, let's be practical.
that you can use to boost your happiness?
I'm ready.
So first up, exercise. Now, we all know exercise is good for us,
Right.
but they really break down how it
Yeah.
impacts our mood.
Yeah, they talk about those endorphins,
Yeah, those
those
endorphins.
natural mood boosters.
And the best part is you don't have to run a marathon to reap the benefits.
No, even a short walk can make a difference.
Right, just getting your body moving,
Yeah.
getting that blood flowing.
Just 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, can make a big difference in your mood.
Huge difference.
They also talk about mindfulness and meditation.
Okay.
Now, I'll admit, I'm a bit skeptical about this
I
one,
used to be too.
but they make a compelling case for how it can help you stay present and quiet that constant mental chatter.
Yeah, it's about learning to observe your thoughts without judgment,
Right.
just letting them come and go.
Which is easier said than done.
It definitely takes practice,
Yeah.
but it can be so helpful for managing stress.
Okay, you're convincing me. I might have to give that a try.
You should.
And finally, they talk about the importance of sleep.
Ugh. Sleep, the foundation of well-being.
I know we all know we need sleep,
We do.
but they really emphasize how crucial it is.
It's not just about feeling rested.
Right.
It's about our emotional well-being.
Yeah, for emotional regulation,
Yeah.
mental clarity.
If you're sleep deprived,
Yeah.
everything feels harder.
Oh, for sure.
You're more irritable. You're more likely to make bad decisions.
Yeah, your patience is like
Well,
non-existent.
so make sleep a priority.
So good sleep equals a happier you.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm curious, have you tried any of these happiness-boosting tips in your own life?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to incorporate more of these things into my routine. Like, I've been making an effort to get more exercise. I've been trying to be more mindful and present. And I've definitely been prioritizing sleep because I know how important it is
Yeah.
for my overall well-being.
It makes a big difference.
It does.
And, speaking of things that make a big difference,
Yeah.
one of the things they talk about in the podcast is gratitude.
Oh, yes, gratitude is huge.
And I'm actually really curious to dive into that more
Yeah, me too.
because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
It can be hard to practice gratitude, especially when things are tough.
Yeah. How do you find things to be grateful for
Right.
when everything seems to be going wrong?
Exactly.
So I'm really interested to see what they have to say about that.
Yeah, me too.
But we're going to have to save that for part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, stay tuned.
Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're back, and we're diving into the topic of gratitude, which I think is super fascinating.
Yeah, it's a really powerful practice.
It is, and I think a lot of people struggle with it. Like, how do you actually cultivate gratitude, especially when, life isn't always sunshine and rainbows?
Right, because it's easy to focus on the negative.
Yeah, especially when things are tough.
But the research shows that people who practice gratitude regularly are actually happier.
Really?
Yeah, they tend to have better relationships. They're more resilient.
They even sleep better.
Wow. Okay, so how do they suggest we actually practice gratitude?
Well, they talk about a few different things.
Okay.
One thing they emphasize is that it doesn't have to be this big, formal thing.
Okay.
It can be as simple as just taking a few minutes each day to think about things you're grateful for.
No.
Like you can write them down in a journal,
Mm-hmm.
or you can just reflect on them in your mind.
So just taking a moment to appreciate the good things.
Exactly.
Even the little things.
Like that delicious cup of coffee in the morning,
Right.
or a beautiful sunset.
Or like a really good hug.
Yes, exactly. It's about training your brain to focus on the positive.
But what about when things are going wrong?
Yeah, that's when it can be the most challenging.
Yeah. How do you find things to be grateful for when you're in the middle of a tough situation?
Well, that's where it becomes even more important.
Okay.
Because even when things are tough, there are always things to be grateful for.
Like what?
Like
Yeah.
your health,
Okay.
your loved ones, the fact that you woke up this morning. Okay.
It's about finding those glimmers of light in the darkness.
I see what you mean. It's like shifting your focus
Exactly.
from what's missing to what you already have.
Yeah, and it's not about ignoring the negative.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging it, but also recognizing that there's still good in your life.
And they actually talk about how gratitude can help you reframe those negative experiences.
Yes.
Like instead of seeing them as setbacks,
Right.
you can see them as opportunities for growth.
Yeah. It's like gratitude gives you that extra boost of resilience.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. The more you practice gratitude,
Yeah.
the more resilient you become.
And the easier it is to handle those tough situations.
And the more you're able to appreciate the good things.
Wow. Okay. I'm sold. I'm definitely going to start practicing gratitude more.
I think we should start a gratitude challenge.
Ooh, I love that idea.
Yeah. We can each commit to writing down 3 things we're grateful for every day.
And then we can share them with each other.
Yeah. It'll be like a little accountability buddy system.
Okay, let's do it.
It's a...
So we've talked about gratitude,
Yes.
but there's another big piece of the happiness puzzle that they discuss in the podcast,
What's that?
and that's purpose.
Yes. Purpose.
That feeling of knowing why you're here
Mm-hmm.
and what your contribution to the world is.
It's about finding meaning in your life.
But what if you don't have some grand world-changing mission?
Well, purpose doesn't have to be about something huge.
Uh,
It can be found in the everyday things,
okay.
like your work, your hobbies,
Mhm.
your relationships.
So it's not necessarily about, like, curing cancer.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's more about aligning your actions with your values and
Sure.
finding something that gives you a sense of fulfillment.
So, like, if someone is really passionate about gardening,
Yeah.
even if they're not, like, running a huge farm or anything, the act of tending to their garden can bring purpose to their life.
Exactly. It's about finding those activities that light you up,
Yeah, that make you feel like you're making a difference.
even if it's just in your own little corner of the world.
I love that it's like purpose can be found in the everyday,
Exactly.
not just in these big lofty goals.
And sometimes it's about looking at what you're already doing
Mhm.
and finding ways to make it more meaningful.
Like maybe you volunteer at a local shelter
Yeah.
or you mentor a young person.
It's about finding those things that resonate with you
Yeah.
and making them a part of your life.
This is making me think about how all these different pieces of the happiness puzzle fit together.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've got relationships,
Yeah.
mindset actions, gratitude, purpose.
It's like weaving a tapestry.
It's not just about one thing.
Right.
It's about the whole picture.
And it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, happiness is a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. It's about cultivating these habits,
Mhm.
nurturing our relationships,
Approaching life with a sense of curiosity and growth.
and recognizing that happiness is something we actively create.
So that brings us to the end of part 2 of the science of happiness.
Okay.
But before we move on to the final part,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are your biggest takeaways so far?
That's a good question.
What's resonating with you the most?
I think for me, it's that connection between gratitude and a growth mindset.
Yeah.
I wonder if practicing gratitude could actually make it easier to embrace challenges.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like if you're already focusing on the positive
Yeah.
and appreciating what you have,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're less likely to get bogged down by setbacks.
It's like gratitude gives you that extra boost of resilience.
I think so.
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah, something to ponder.
And speaking of things to ponder,
Yeah.
the next part of the podcast dives into some really interesting research on happiness
Yeah.
and how it's influenced by our environment and the people around us.
Like societal and cultural influences.
That is it.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore those external factors that can impact our happiness.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we're back, and, we've been talking about all these things we can do personally to boost our happiness.
Yeah, like all the internal stuff.
But in this last part of the science of happiness, they kind of shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and start talking about those external factors
Yeah.
that can actually influence our happiness levels.
Like the environment we live in,
Yeah, the people we surround ourselves
our
with,
culture,
all that stuff.
which is really interesting because it's like we've been focusing on all this personal stuff we can control,
Right.
but there's this whole other layer of things
Yeah.
that are outside of our control.
So it begs the question, like, how much of our happiness is actually determined by these external factors?
Yeah, nature versus nurture.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like how much of it is our genes and how much of it is our environment.
And one of the things they talk about is social contagion, which is basically the idea that happiness can be contagious.
Oh, like if you're around happy people,
Yeah.
you're more likely to be happy yourself.
Exactly. Like emotions can spread from person to person,
That makes sense.
which is kind of crazy to think about, right?
It is, because it means that our happiness
Yeah.
is not just about us.
It's also about the people we surround ourselves with.
So if you want to be happier,
Yes.
surround yourself with happy people.
Right. It's like choosing your happiness posse.
I love that.
But on the flip side,
Yeah.
if you're constantly around negative people, that can actually drag you down.
It can definitely impact your mood.
So it's important to be mindful of
Yeah.
the company you keep.
And the environments you put yourself in.
And another thing they talk about is cultural influences,
Okay.
like how different cultures
Yeah.
have different ideas about happiness.
And different ways of expressing it.
Right. And they give this example of how in some cultures, like in the United States,
Yeah.
happiness is often associated with
Yeah.
individual achievement.
Like success and material possessions.
Right. Whereas in other cultures,
Mhm.
like in some Asian cultures,
Yeah.
happiness is more about social harmony.
And interconnectedness.
So it's like our cultural background can actually shape
Yeah.
our definition of happiness.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
How these cultural norms can influence something as personal as happiness.
And it makes you wonder, like, how much of our own beliefs about happiness
Yeah.
are actually influenced by the culture we grew up in.
Right, like we might not even be aware of it.
Yeah, it's like those unconscious biases
Exactly.
that we all have.
So it's something to be aware of.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the science of happiness,
We have.
from personal strategies to external influences.
It's been a really interesting journey.
It has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me
Yeah,
is that happiness is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
definitely not.
It's a complex interplay of factors, both internal and external.
And it's an ongoing process.
Right. It's not a destination.
It's about continuously learning and growing.
And finding what works for you.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this episode,
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If happiness is a skill we can develop,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the obstacles
Yeah.
that might be preventing us from experiencing true joy?
Like what's holding us back?
Is it our own beliefs?
Mm-hmm.
Societal pressures?
Fear.
Maybe it's time we start challenging those things
Yeah.
and creating a world that truly supports well-being.
I love that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Okay.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
No. Keep exploring.
So keep thinking, keep learning,
Mm-hmm.
and keep choosing happiness.
And remember,
Yeah.
happiness is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this happiness adventure.
It's been fun.
And to all you listeners out there,
Yes.
keep diving deep, keep exploring,
Mm-hmm.
and keep choosing happiness.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time. All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into happiness.
Yeah.
If you remember, we started out by defining happiness
Yeah.
and debunking some of the common myths.
Right.
And then we got into some of the habits and the personal strategies that can help us boost our happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're going to be zooming out a little bit and kind of looking at the bigger picture.
Okay.
How communities
Yeah.
and even whole societies
Right.
play a role in our happiness as individuals.
Absolutely. And this is really where things get fascinating.
Okay.
Because, we often think about happiness as this very personal thing,
Yeah.
almost like a checklist. Like, did I achieve my goals? Do I have the right job, the right partner, enough stuff?
Yeah.
But the truth is, our happiness is really deeply intertwined with the world around us.
Right.
Like, it's not just about us as individuals.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack that a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Our first source jumps right into the power of connection. And it's not just about, being like a social butterfly.
Right. Right.
But it's about belonging
Yes.
and feeling like you're like a part of something
Yes.
larger than yourself.
Exactly. And that feeling of belonging,
Yeah.
that has a profound impact on our well-being.
Okay.
The research on social support is incredibly robust. It acts as a buffer against stress.
Right.
So when things get tough, having that strong support network can make all the difference,
Mm-hmm.
but it also amplifies the good times.
Oh, interesting.
Sharing joy with others
Yeah.
actually makes it more intense, more meaningful.
It's like when you tell a friend some good news and their excitement makes you even more excited.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And this source also talks about the surprising benefits of volunteering.
Okay.
It's not just about being nice,
Right.
Studies actually show that helping others
Yeah.
boosts your own happiness
Really?
and even your physical health.
Wow.
It's like a win-win.
Okay, so it's not just about them.
Yeah.
It's also about us.
Exactly. And it taps into that sense of purpose,
Right.
contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes beyond like one-off acts of kindness.
Right.
Think about those shared experiences that really bind communities together.
Okay.
Cultural events, rituals, traditions.
Yeah.
These become anchors of happiness, because
Yeah.
they connect us to something that endures
Right.
over time, something larger than ourselves.
Right. Okay. So we've established that connection is key,
Mm-hmm.
but here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Happiness doesn't look the same around the world.
Right.
These sources really explore how other cultures approach happiness in completely different ways.
Absolutely. And one captivating example is this Danish concept of hygge. Hygge, yeah.
How do you pronounce that?
It's pronounced hygge.
Hygge.
Yeah. And it's often translated as cozy, but it's so much more than just, snuggling up with a blanket.
Okay.
It's really a whole cultural mindset of slowing down, appreciating simple pleasures,
Yeah.
and deepening connections with the people around you.
Okay.
Imagine candlelight, warm fire, good food shared with loved ones, and just a feeling of deep contentment and presence.
Okay.
That's hygge.
So Hygge is about intentionally creating that atmosphere
Yes.
of comfort and connection.
Yes.
Do you think that's something that we lack in our
I
fast-paced modern lives?
It's certainly a concept worth exploring.
Okay.
I mean, while hake might be difficult to fully translate into another culture, the core principles,
Yeah.
slowing down, savoring simple pleasures, prioritizing connection, those are universally applicable.
Okay.
And in fact, Denmark consistently ranks high in global happiness surveys. So while it's hard to say definitively, it's all due to hygge,
Right.
their emphasis on social connection, work-life balance, enjoying the simple things certainly seems to contribute.
Right. It makes you wonder what we could learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And speaking of alternative approaches, this source highlights Bhutan,
Okay.
a country that actually measures its success by gross national happiness,
Wow.
not just money.
It's truly a remarkable approach.
Yeah.
They prioritize well-being, environmental sustainability, and cultural preservation as much as economic growth.
Wow. So they're not just focused on the money aspect.
Exactly. Their constitution actually mandates that economic development must happen in a way that promotes happiness and spiritual well-being for its citizens.
Okay.
And to measure this, they use this complex index
Okay.
that takes into account things like psychological well-being, health, education, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity, and living standards.
So it's not just this vague feel-good idea.
No.
They've really put it into practice.
Yes.
In their government
Yes.
and their policies.
Absolutely.
What do you think are the most impactful components of this gross national happiness index?
That's a great question. What stands out to me is their emphasis on community vitality and ecological diversity.
Okay.
Two areas that are often, neglected in traditional measures of progress.
Right.
But they recognize that a healthy environment and a strong sense of community are essential for individual and collective well-being.
Yeah.
So it really challenges our assumptions about what a successful society looks like.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, how does your culture approach happiness?
Right.
What are the unspoken assumptions about what a good life should be?
That's such a crucial point because we often get caught up in our own cultural bubbles where I was assuming that everyone sees the world the same way.
Yeah. But, these alternative perspectives like those found in Denmark and Bhutan, they offer these valuable insights into the, multifaceted nature of happiness and the different paths that we can take to cultivate it, both individually and as a society.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating how different cultures value different parts of well-being, right?
Yeah.
But let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about governments.
Okay.
Because this source argues that the policies and the economic systems we live under have a huge impact on our happiness as a society.
Yeah.
It's not just about our individual choices, but the very structure of our society plays a role.
Yeah, and this isn't just about feel-good initiatives.
Right.
We're talking about concrete policies that directly impact our well-being. Take work-life balance, for instance.
Okay.
It's not just about having enough vacation days. It's about having the flexibility to, live a fulfilling life outside of work.
Yeah.
To spend time with loved ones, pursue hobbies, engage in your community.
Right.
All those things that, contribute to a sense of purpose and well-being.
Yeah, because if you're constantly, stressed and overworked,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter how many meditation apps you have. You know,
Right.
you're, fighting an uphill battle.
Exactly. You're fighting an uphill battle. And then there's the question of access to healthcare and education.
Okay.
When everyone has a fair shot at good health and quality learning, it not only levels the playing field, but it reduces stress for everyone.
Right.
And this leads to more overall life satisfaction, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
A healthy, educated population is probably going to be a happier population.
Exactly.
It's like investing in the foundation
It
of
is.
well-being.
Exactly. And we can't overlook the importance of environmental sustainability. This might seem tangential,
Right.
but it's directly connected to our well-being.
Okay.
Clean air, green spaces, combating climate change.
Yeah.
These things benefit
Yeah.
both our mental and physical health.
So it's not just about saving the planet.
Right.
It's about, like, safeguarding.
It's about our own well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our own happiness.
Our own happiness,
Well, there-
exactly. And then there's the often debated issue of income inequality.
Okay.
Now, this isn't about advocating for everyone to be rich.
Right.
It's about addressing the vast gap
Yeah.
between the rich and the poor.
Right.
Studies have shown that societies with more economic equality
Yeah.
tend to have higher levels of overall happiness.
So it's not just about, like, how much money you have. It's about how
Exactly.
that wealth is distributed.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
Extreme inequality creates social divisions, breeds resentment, undermines trust, and it ultimately erodes the fabric of society.
Mhm.
It's like a recipe for unhappiness on a societal level.
Yeah. These are some pretty, like, big
Right.
systemic issues.
Yes.
It can feel overwhelming,
Yeah, I understand that feeling.
to think about how, like, yeah, we as individuals
Yeah.
can impact any of this.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like our actions are just a drop in the bucket.
But remember, we're all part of this system. You know?
Yeah.
The choices we make, the policies we support, the values we promote,
Mm-hmm.
they all contribute to the kind of society we create.
Right.
And that society, in turn, shapes our individual happiness.
So we're talking about, like, a sort of
Yeah.
collective responsibility for happiness.
Exactly. It's not just about, looking out for ourselves,
Right.
but creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And this is where things get really exciting because
Okay.
happiness is contagious.
Yes.
Wait, what? You mean like a yawn? Like I can actually catch happiness from someone else.
It's not quite that simple,
Okay.
but there is compelling evidence that positive emotions are literally contagious
Really?
through social networks. When we're surrounded by happy people,
Yeah.
we're more likely to feel happy ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
It creates a kind of upward spiral, a ripple effect of positivity.
So if I'm, like, hanging out with all these grumpy people, I'm doomed to a life of misery.
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but it does highlight the importance of choosing our social circles wisely
Right.
and cultivating positive relationships.
Okay.
And it goes beyond our, immediate circles.
Okay.
Think about the ripple effect on a larger scale.
Okay.
When a whole community prioritizes well-being, kindness, generosity, and mutual support,
Mm-hmm.
it creates a more resilient and happier society overall.
So like a domino effect.
Exactly.
One person's happiness can kind of spark another's and another's,
Yes.
and it just keeps spreading.
Yeah. It creates a wave of positivity that spreads throughout the community.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the power of individual actions.
Right.
Even small acts of kindness, gratitude, and positivity can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves,
Yeah.
contributing to this collective sense of well-being.
Right.
It's a beautiful and empowering thought.
So it's not just me trying to be happy, but we're all kind of like working together to make a world where everybody can be happier.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that our happiness is kind of interconnected. Like we thrive when we help each other out,
Mm-hmm.
and creating a happier world, it all starts with us as individuals.
This has been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We started with personal habits,
Right.
then the power of connection,
Mm-hmm.
and now this big picture view of how societies can actually embrace happiness
Yeah.
as a core value.
It's a whole new way of looking at the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
It shows that happiness is multifaceted.
Okay.
It's this combination of what we do, who we're with, and the world around us. It's not just chasing those quick bursts of pleasure.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating this deeper sense of well-being
Right.
that impacts every part of our lives.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I have one final thought-provoking question for you.
Okay.
We've been talking about how happiness is contagious, right?
Yes.
So knowing that, what small act of kindness or positivity can you spread in your community today?
Ooh. That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
Because, when we shift our focus from me to we,
Yeah.
when we start thinking about how what we do impacts other people's well-being,
Mm-hmm.
that's when we can really unlock that potential for like happiness together.
It's almost like we're all little happiness generators just running around spreading joy and resilience.
I love that analogy. And the more we learn about happiness, the more we can like create those positive moments on purpose.
Yeah, it's not about waiting for it to happen. It's about making it happen,
Yeah, exactly.
both for ourselves and for others.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, that about wraps our deep dive into the science of happiness.
It's been a pleasure exploring all these fascinating ideas with you.
Yeah, me too.
And remember, happiness is a journey, not a destination.
And it's a journey we're all on together. So keep learning, keep growing, keep spreading kindness and joy. And until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.
Welcome back, everyone. It's great to have you here for another deep dive into the science of happiness.
It's great to be back.
It's amazing what we've already uncovered in our previous deep dives.
Right.
We've explored the very definition of happiness. We've learned some pretty cool tricks to actually boost our well-being.
Absolutely.
And, we even discovered how much our communities and the cultures we live in actually play a role in all of this.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
But let's be real for a second.
Great.
Life.
Yeah.
Life isn't always, sunshine and rainbows on this road to happiness.
You're telling me?
We all hit those bumps.
Oh, yeah.
We all hit those detours along the way.
For sure.
And that's why today
Okay.
we're going to tackle those obstacles head on,
Love it.
and we're going to do it using science as our guide.
That's the best way.
Yeah, like a roadmap to help you steer clear of those happiness roadblocks.
I like that, a roadmap.
Yep.
It's interesting because a lot of the time, the biggest obstacles to happiness, they're not the external things, the situations we find ourselves in.
Oh.
They're actually the internal stuff, like the patterns in our thinking and the reactions we sort of develop over time. It's like understanding those patterns and reactions. That's like getting the key
Ooh, a key.
to unlock a whole new level of happiness.
Oh, I am so intrigued. Tell me more. What are some of the biggest things that we should be watching out for? The culprits. What are the things that really throw a wrench in our happiness gears?
Well, one of the huge GE ones is chronic stress.
Okay, stress.
And we're not talking about, just feeling swamped for a day or two. It's deeper.
Okay.
It actually triggers a physical response in your body.
No way.
Yeah. So when you're stressed out all the time, like chronically stressed, your body is pumping out this hormone, cortisol. And cortisol, it's helpful in the short term. It helps you deal with threats, like our ancestors running from a tiger.
Right. Fight or flight.
Exactly.
Correct.
But when it's constant, when it's chronic,
Yeah.
that constant flow of cortisol can actually block your ability to feel joy.
Wow.
And that can lead to some serious long-term consequences for both your mind and your body.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of just being totally overwhelmed by stress. I mean, I think everyone can, but I never really thought about it actually messing with my happiness on a chemical level.
It's wild, right? Like your brain chemistry is actually being altered.
So is burnout basically what happens when that stress goes into overdrive?
That is a great way to put it. Burnout, it's like your body's internal battery, totally drained. You feel emotionally exhausted, detached, even cynical sometimes. And the things you used to love, the things that used to bring you joy, PFFT, just don't spark anymore.
It sounds incredibly draining. I can't imagine. I imagine a lot of people out there are dealing with this, especially, we live in such a fast-paced world these days.
Oh, absolutely. It's so common.
And it's not just work either.
Right.
You're so right. A lot of people associate it with work, and that's definitely a big one.
Yeah.
But it can also be triggered by, other areas of life that are just prolonged stress,
Okay.
like caring for loved ones,
Right.
facing ongoing challenges. It's that overall feeling of depletion.
Yeah. So we've got chronic stress and burnout definitely high on the list of happiness roadblocks.
Yeah.
What else? What else should we be aware of?
This one might surprise you.
Okay.
Negativity bias.
Negativity bias.
Believe it or not, our brains,
Yeah.
they're actually wired to focus more on the negative experiences than the positive ones.
Really? Wait, seriously. Why would our brains be working against us like that?
Well, think about it from an evolutionary perspective.
Right.
Way back when, caveman days and all that.
Yeah. Focusing on potential threats.
Yeah.
Helped our ancestors survive.
Right.
You had to be aware of the saber-toothed tiger lurking in the bushes.
Makes sense.
But in today's world,
Yeah.
this negativity bias, it could really sabotage our happiness. It
Interesting.
causes us to dwell on the bad stuff, even if it's small, and we just sort of let the good stuff slip by.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Okay, so, we've talked about stress, negativity bias, but now this one really hits home for me, especially with, the whole social media thing taking over our lives. Social comparison. Do you ever feel like you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, like online?
You're spot on to bring that up.
Yeah.
Social media has really taken this tendency, this human tendency, to compare ourselves to others
Right.
and amplified it like crazy.
Yeah, it's like times 1,000.
And it's a surefire recipe for unhappiness.
Oh, yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with these carefully curated versions of people's
It's
lives.
their highlight reel, right?
Right. Exactly. Just the highlight reel, not the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to start feeling inadequate,
Oh, yeah.
even if our own lives are objectively pretty good.
Totally. It's like everyone else is on this amazing adventure and you're just stuck in the same old routine.
Exactly. It creates
Yeah.
this pressure to keep up,
Yeah.
to achieve this level of success
Mm.
or happiness that often just feels impossible to reach.
No wonder it can mess with your self-esteem. Right. Make you question if you're doing enough or even being enough.
It's a trap.
Yeah.
And speaking of measuring ourselves against these external standards,
Okay.
there's another big obstacle we need to address.
Oh, tell me.
The trap of seeking external validation for our happiness.
Oh, the classic "I'll be happy when" scenario.
Got it.
I think we've all fallen into that trap at some point.
It's so common. But here's the thing. When we tie our happiness to things like achievements,
Okay.
possessions,
Hmm.
or other people's approval, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Why is that?
Because those things, they're ultimately outside of our control.
Right.
They
Right.
can change in a heartbeat,
Oh, yeah.
vanish, leaving our happiness just hanging in the balance.
So you're saying that real happiness isn't about chasing those external rewards, but about finding something deeper, something within ourselves.
You got it. It's about cultivating happiness that comes from within, from living in alignment with your values, pursuing goals that truly matter to you, finding joy in the simple things.
This is all making me think. What are some practical ways to actually shift our mindset and start building that inner happiness? What are the steps we can take?
That is a fantastic question. And the good news is that there are so many practical strategies that you can start using today to cultivate more happiness and resilience in your life.
That's what I like to hear. I'm all about taking action. So let's start with stress.
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels like it's something everyone's struggling with to some degree these days. What can we actually do about it?
Well, one incredibly powerful technique is mindfulness and meditation.
Okay.
Meditation.
Like-
And it's not just some like new age trend.
Yeah.
There's real science behind it. Deep breathing exercises, for example, can actually help calm your nervous system and lower those cortisol levels we talked about earlier. It's essentially like you're giving your body a signal that it's safe to relax
Okay.
and to let go of that stress response.
Some people I think find meditation really helpful, but for others, I know it can be kind of difficult or even frustrating. What advice would you give to those people who struggle with it?
I think the key is finding a type of meditation that works for you. There are so many different approaches out there. Some people find guided meditations helpful, where you're led through a specific practice.
Yeah.
Others prefer to just focus on their breath or maybe using a mantra.
Mm.
There are even apps these days that can guide you through different techniques.
Oh, cool.
So experiment a bit and see what resonates with you. Even just a few minutes a day can make a difference.
That's a great point. I'm definitely going to check out some of those apps.
Mhm.
So meditation is one tool. What else can we do to manage stress effectively?
This might sound surprisingly simple,
Mm-hmm.
but good time management is crucial. When you're feeling overwhelmed with just like a never-ending to-do list, it's so easy to just get caught up in that cycle of stress.
For sure.
But by prioritizing tasks, setting realistic goals, and breaking down those big projects into smaller, more manageable steps,
Okay.
you can regain a sense of control and really reduce that feeling of overwhelm.
I can see how that would make a big difference. It's like you're taking charge of your time and your energy instead of letting the stress control you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of taking charge, let's move on to tackling that negativity bias we discussed earlier.
Uh-huh.
Remember, our brains are wired to focus on the negative,
Right.
but we can actually train our minds to be more positive.
I love the idea of rewiring our brains for happiness. Tell me more.
One simple yet incredibly powerful practice is gratitude journaling. Taking just a few minutes each day to write down things you're grateful for can have a profound effect on your outlook. It helps shift your focus from what's wrong to what's right in your life.
That's a great tip. I've actually tried gratitude journaling before, and it's amazing how, even on those tough days, there's always something to be grateful for.
Always.
Even if it's something as simple as, a warm cup of coffee or a sunny day.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is the more you practice gratitude, the more you start to notice those positive things naturally,
Hmm.
without even having to write them down. It becomes a habit, a way of seeing the world through a more appreciative lens.
So gratitude helps us focus on the good. But what about those times when we're facing, actual challenges or setbacks? How do we prevent those from sending us spiraling, into negativity?
That's where positive reappraisal comes in.
Positive reappraisal.
It's not about denying or ignoring difficulties,
Okay.
but rather about actively reframing them as opportunities for growth and learning.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practice?
Absolutely. Let's say you experience a setback at work, like a project that doesn't go as planned. Instead of dwelling on the negative aspects and feeling defeated, you could ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this as an opportunity to improve my skills or approach things differently next time?
Yeah, I've definitely been in situations like that where I let the setback, really get to me. But looking back, those experiences often led to some really valuable lessons and even new opportunities. What's fascinating is how a simple shift in perspective can make such a big difference in how we handle those tough times.
Precisely. And this ties back to building resilience, which is essential for navigating those inevitable ups and downs of life and maintaining a sense of happiness.
Okay, we've got some tools for managing stress and combating negativity. Now let's tackle social comparison. Any advice on how to break free from that trap, especially in this age of, constant social media?
The most obvious but often overlooked solution is to limit your social media use. It's about being mindful of what content you consume and setting boundaries to protect your mental well-being.
It's so true. We all know that too much social media can be detrimental to our happiness, but it can be so hard to resist. Do you have any tips for actually implementing those boundaries?
I think it really comes down to being intentional.
Yeah.
You could try scheduling specific times for checking social media rather than mindlessly scrolling throughout the day.
Okay.
Or you could unfollow accounts that trigger feelings of comparison or inadequacy. And most importantly, remember that what you see on social media is often a carefully curated representation of reality, not the whole picture.
That's such an important reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in those curated images and forget that everyone is dealing with their own challenges, even if they don't share them online.
Absolutely. And here's a powerful shift in perspective. Focus on your unique journey. Instead of comparing yourself to others, celebrate your own progress, no matter how small it may seem.
Yeah.
Remember, you're on your own path, and it's not about being better than anyone else, but rather about becoming the best version of yourself.
I love that. It's about defining success on your own terms, not based on some external standard or comparison.
Exactly. And that brings us to the concept of intrinsic happiness, which is about finding joy and fulfillment from within, rather than relying on those external sources like achievements, possessions, or other people's approval.
Mm.
Remember how we talked about those external things being unreliable and constantly changing?
Right.
Intrinsic happiness is about cultivating a sense of well-being that comes from living in alignment with your values, pursuing goals that are meaningful to you, and nurturing relationships that bring you joy.
So it's about shifting our focus from what we have to who we are and what truly matters to us.
Exactly. And it's about finding pleasure in the simple things, the everyday moments that often go unnoticed. Could be spending time in nature, listening to your favorite music, or simply enjoying a good conversation with a friend. It's about cultivating a sense of appreciation for the present moment, rather than constantly striving for something more.
This all sounds amazing, but I have to ask, how do we actually cultivate that intrinsic happiness? It feels like a big shift from the way we're often conditioned to think about success and happiness.
You're right, it does require a shift in perspective. And it's an ongoing process, not a destination.
Okay.
But there are concrete steps you can take. One is to identify your core values. What truly matters to you? What kind of person do you want to be? Once you have a clear sense of your values, you can start making choices that align with them.
That makes a lot of sense. If we're not living in accordance with our values, it's no wonder we might feel unfulfilled or like something's missing.
Exactly. And another key to intrinsic happiness is to pursue goals that are intrinsically motivating,
Okay.
meaning that they're driven by your own interests and passions, not by external pressures or expectations. It's about doing things that bring you joy and a sense of purpose, simply for the sake of doing them.
I love that. It's about finding that sweet spot where your passions and your values intersect. So we're talking about a shift from external validation to internal fulfillment. It's about finding happiness from within rather than chasing it in the outside world.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the concept of resilience, which is so crucial for navigating the inevitable ups and downs of life. It's about having the inner strength to bounce back from adversity, to learn from challenges, and to keep moving forward with hope and optimism.
All right, let's dive into resilience then. What are some key strategies for building that inner strength?
Well, one important aspect is fostering optimism. It's not about being naive or ignoring the realities of life, but rather about having a hopeful mindset, believing in your ability to overcome challenges, and focusing on solutions rather than problems.
I've definitely noticed that optimistic people just seem to handle stress and setbacks so much better, and their positive energy can be contagious too.
Absolutely. Optimism is a powerful force, and it's something you can cultivate through practice. One way to do this is by visualizing positive outcomes. Imagine yourself successfully navigating a challenging situation, achieving a goal, or simply feeling calm and confident. The more you practice visualizing those positive outcomes, the more your brain starts to believe they're possible, and the more likely you are to actually achieve them.
It's like training our minds to focus on what we want to happen rather than dwelling on what we fear might happen. It's amazing how powerful our thoughts can be.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of positive reappraisal that we talked about earlier. It's about reframing challenges as opportunities for growth rather than viewing them as threats.
Okay, optimism is key. What else can we do to build resilience?
Another crucial aspect is seeking support when you need it. We're social creatures, and having strong social connections is essential for our well-being. Don't be afraid to reach out to friends, family, or even professional counselors when you're facing difficult times. Talking things through, getting different perspectives, and feeling supported can make a world of difference in your ability to cope with challenges.
That's so true. Sometimes just having someone listen to you can make a huge difference in how you feel. It's a reminder that we don't have to go through tough times alone.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking care of yourself, don't underestimate the power of simple self-care practices. Getting enough sleep, eating nutritious food, and engaging in regular physical activity can all boost your resilience and give you the energy and mental clarity to deal with whatever life throws your way.
Self-care is so important, but it's often the first thing to go when we're stressed or busy. We need to remind ourselves that it's not selfish. It's essential for our well-being.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And finally, one of the most powerful ways to build resilience is to learn from setbacks.
Mm.
Instead of viewing failures as defeats, see them as stepping stones,
Hmm.
as valuable learning experiences that can help you grow and improve.
I love that perspective. It's about reframing failure as feedback, as an opportunity to course correct and do better next time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's about developing a growth mindset, believing that you can learn and improve over time
Right.
rather than getting stuck in a fixed mindset where you believe your abilities are set in stone. This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered so much ground, from managing stress to cultivating optimism, seeking support, practicing self-care, and even reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth.
You're absolutely right. And the most important thing is to remember that you're not alone in this journey. We all face challenges, and we all have the capacity to develop resilience and cultivate greater happiness in our lives. It feels like we're at this turning point in our deep dive. We've explored the obstacles,
Right.
and now we're kind of ready to create that roadmap to happiness. So where do we begin? What are those first steps in creating a personal happiness plan?
It all starts with some deep self-reflection.
Yeah.
What are the things that truly bring you joy and fulfillment?
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in what society tells us
Right.
or what we think should make us happy.
Yeah.
But real happiness comes from connecting with those things that light us up inside.
I love that. It reminds me of those personality tests that ask, like, what would you do if money were no object?
Exactly.
It's all about tapping into those core passions, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you do if you could design your ideal day?
I love that question. Maybe it's spending time in nature.
Yeah.
Maybe it's being creative,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with loved ones,
Yep.
learning new things, or giving back to your community.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, think about how you can weave more of those activities into your daily life.
So it's not necessarily about making like huge drastic changes, but about finding those small ways to just spark joy in our everyday routines.
You got it. Small, consistent actions can really add up to big changes over time.
Love it.
While we're on the topic of connections,
Yeah.
take a moment To think about the people in your life who truly uplift you, who make you feel seen and supported.
Yeah.
Nurturing those relationships is crucial for happiness.
Mm.
It's about surrounding yourself with people who bring out your best.
It makes a big difference, right? To have these people in your life who you can celebrate with, but also who you can kind of lean on during the tough times. Are you saying that, like, some relationships can actually drain our happiness?
It's true that some relationships can be more challenging than others. It's important to be mindful of the people you spend your time with and how they make you feel. Surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people can have a huge impact on your overall well-being.
That's a good point.
And while we're talking about things that matter deeply,
Okay.
let's talk about your core values.
Okay, value.
Are you living in a way that aligns with those values?
Hmm.
When our actions and choices reflect our deepest beliefs, it creates a sense of integrity and purpose that contributes to overall happiness.
It's about walking the walk right, making sure our lives are a reflection of what we truly believe in.
Precisely.
Mm.
And finally, let's revisit those powerful tools we discussed earlier, gratitude and mindfulness. How can you make those practices a regular part of your life?
Yeah.
Remember all the science we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's about putting it into action. It could be keeping a gratitude journal, practicing a morning meditation, or simply taking a few moments each day to appreciate the simple things around you.
This all ties back to creating a life that feels intentional and authentic, right? Filled with things that bring us joy, people who uplift us, and practices that nourish our well-being. It's so inspiring, but it also feels a little overwhelming. Where do we even begin with putting all of this into action?
That's so understandable.
Yeah.
The beauty of a personal happiness plan is that it's unique to you. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
Start by picking one or two areas that resonate with you the most.
Hmm.
Maybe you commit to a daily gratitude practice,
Okay.
or schedule more time for activities you love. What feels most important to you right now?
So it's about taking small, manageable steps rather than trying to change everything overnight.
Exactly. Remember, this is a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and don't be afraid to adjust your plan as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Life is constantly changing,
Right.
and your happiness plan should evolve along with it. What works for you today might need to be tweaked or adjusted down the road.
This deep dive has been such an empowering experience. We started by uncovering those obstacles that can kind of trip us up on our journey to happiness.
Yeah.
But then we moved into, solution mode, exploring practical tools and strategies to overcome those challenges and build a more resilient and fulfilling life. And now we're wrapping up with a call to action. Create your own personalized happiness blueprint. It's about designing a life that truly reflects what matters most to you.
It's been such a pleasure to be a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the science of happiness. We hope you've learned some valuable insights and feel inspired to create your own happiness plan. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep chasing joy.